always talk about how we perceive the world, right? You know, how we experience it through our senses.
Right.
And we kind of assume, like, our senses just work, right? You open your eyes and boom, the world's just there.
Yeah.
But what if it's not that simple? What if, especially with something like space, how we perceive space, it's not just about the information coming in. Like,
Right.
what if what we do, like how we move, how we act, that actually shapes what we see and feel spatially?
Absolutely. That's a really deep question.
Yeah.
And that's what we're diving into today.
Okay.
These action-based theories of perception, that's what they're called.
Okay.
And they really flip that intuitive idea on its head.
Right.
That we're just these passive receivers of information.
Right. So instead of the world acting upon us, we are actively engaged in constructing our spatial awareness.
Exactly.
So this isn't just some new idea, right?
Not at all.
Our sources for this deep dive go way back.
Right back, yeah.
Like suggesting that thinkers have been trying to figure out this connection between action and spatial awareness for centuries.
Absolutely. It's a classic philosophical problem.
Right.
You know, how do we actually experience space?
Yeah, how do we come to know it?
Yeah, and how much of it is us?
Right.
You know, our bodies, our movement.
Okay, so we've got this historical sweep.
We do.
It's a really cool deep dive.
Yeah, from the early 18th century all the way up to current thinking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the common thread through all of these thinkers and all these times is this idea, right, that our motor capabilities, what our bodies can do, that actually contributes to how we understand the spatial world.
Right.
Of course, different thinkers emphasize different aspects of it.
Different pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
So our listener out there, you know, who loves to think deeply about these things, our mission today is to really unpack these ideas.
Absolutely.
We want to kind of pull out what's at the heart of this and see where these different paths lead, these different thinkers.
Totally.
And maybe, you know, along the way, even challenge some of our own assumptions about how we experience space.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's start with someone who really laid some groundwork here.
Absolutely, yeah.
George Berkeley.
George Berkeley, yeah.
New Theory of Vision, 1709.
That's right. Way back.
Going way back.
Yeah.
So Berkeley, he had this really revolutionary idea about vision.
He did, yeah.
It really kind of blows your mind when you first hear it.
It does, yeah.
He said, forget this 3D world that you think you're just seeing right in front of you.
Yeah.
He said, no, what your eyes are giving you initially is actually just a flat image, like a painting,
two-dimensional array, of light and color.
So that depth, that sense of a 3D world, that's not just given to us.
No.
Our brains have to construct it.
Exactly, through experience.
So how do we go from that flat image to the richness of what we actually perceive?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And what Berkeley said was, we learn. We learn to interpret those 2D cues, those flat visual cues.
Okay.
By associating them with our tactile experiences.
Touching things,
and importantly, with bodily movements.
Our actions, our movements.
Exactly. So think about a baby, right?
Okay.
Reaching for a toy.
Mm-hmm.
They see the toy, that's the visual impression.
Okay.
And then they reach out.
Yeah.
Their arm extends, they feel their muscles moving, and then they touch the toy.
The sensations of touch.
Exactly. And so through this constant pairing, right?
Yeah, okay.
Of seeing and touching, seeing and moving, that's how we learn to see depth.
So it's like the brain is making this connection between the visual cue and what we expect to feel.
Exactly. And the effort it takes to move.
When we reach out,
Yeah, Berkeley actually had this really great quote.
Oh, I love a good quote.
Yeah, he said, what he sees only suggests to his understanding that after having passed a certain distance.
Okay, so we're moving through space.
Yeah.
To be measured by the motion of his body, which is perceivable by touch.
Right.
He shall come to perceive such and such tangible ideas.
Right.
Okay, tangible. We're talking about touch now.
We are.
Which have been usually connected with such and such visible ideas.
Exactly.
So it's really about making that link.
It is, yeah.
Between what we see and what we then touch.
Totally. And so for Berkeley,
okay,
vision becomes this predictor.
Oh, interesting.
You see something, it tells you, okay, if you move this way, this is what you're going to feel.
Okay.
If you move that way, that's what you're going to feel.
Oh, so it's almost like a guide for our actions.
Absolutely.
In the world.
He had this idea of vision as this universal language.
Okay.
That guides our actions in a way that helps us survive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you see something dangerous, right, you anticipate, ooh, I'm going to feel pain if I touch that.
Right, move away.
Exactly, and so you move defensively.
So it's like a really deeply embodied kind of idea.
It is, yeah.
About how vision works.
Absolutely, and what's cool is that he was already thinking about stuff that we kind of take for granted now.
Like what?
Like the role of our eyes themselves.
Oh.
So not just, moving your arm and touching a toy.
Right.
But like the angle of your eyes, when they converge.
Oh, right.
Or how your lens accommodates to focus. He recognized that those subtle actions, those actually provide information about distance too.
Right.
So even those tiny movements are part of how we learn to see space.
So he was really ahead of his time.
Oh, absolutely. A visionary, you might say.
Right. But like with any big idea, there's always pushback, right?
Of course.
People challenge it.
Yeah. People said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Do we really learn to see depth through touch?
Yeah.
It feels so immediate, right?
Yeah. It doesn't feel like I'm learning it.
Right. When you look out at the world, you just see depth.
Right. Right.
It's not like you have to think about it.
Right. And plus, we all know those trick paintings that look 3D.
Right. Trumbull oil.
But when you touch them, they're totally flat.
They are. So what's going on there, right?
So in those cases, it seems like vision wins.
It does, yeah.
Over touch.
Yeah. And then there's animals, right?
Oh, yeah. Like baby animals.
A lot of baby animals, yeah.
They can like walk and run and stuff?
Yeah, like right out of the womb.
Right. When they're born?
Exactly. So they're navigating space without this big learning period.
Right. So that kind of throws a wrench in the idea.
It does, yeah.
That all depth perception is learned.
Right. Maybe some of it's built in.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's some other connection.
Right. Some other piece of the puzzle we're missing.
Exactly. And then there's the bigger philosophical question.
Here we go.
Of how do we even make these connections between such different experiences?
Yeah.
Like a visual idea.
And a tactile feeling.
Yeah, they seem so different.
Right. How do we bridge that gap?
Big question.
Big questions.
So that leads us to this idea called the local sign doctrine.
Okay, local sign doctrine.
Yeah, it tries to explain how our 2D visual field.
Right, because we still got that flat image on the retina.
You do.
So how do we get to a sense of space from that?
Right.
Okay, local sign doctrine.
This is like building on those early action-based ideas.
Okay.
So thinkers like Lotz.
Okay.
And later Helmholtz.
Yeah.
They really focused on how we make sense of the visual field itself.
Like how we figure out up, down, left, right
exactly.
within that 2D image.
Yeah, so they were saying, okay, motor factors, movement, that's still crucial.
Okay.
But how does that help us spatialize that flat image on our retina?
Okay.
So he said there are these internal markers.
Markers?
Yeah, like little tags that are attached to each point on your retina.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and those tell you where things are in space.
Okay.
So if light hits a certain spot on your retina, the local sign for that spot tells you where that visual input is coming from.
So it's giving it a spatial location.
Exactly.
In that flat image.
Right. So where did he think these local signs came from?
Yeah, where do they come from?
He said they come from the feeling of your eyes moving.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so every time you move your eyes to look at something, you get this unique extra sensation. Yeah. That's the local sign.
And it's tied to the movement of the eyes.
Exactly. So if you move your eyes up, it feels different.
To moving your eyes down.
Right. And those feelings, those become associated with different parts of your retina.
Okay, so it's like I'm building a map in my brain.
You are, yeah.
Of where things are based on how my eyes move.
Exactly. And even if you don't move your eyes all the way, just the feeling of starting to move them can trigger that memory of the whole movement.
So even the potential for movement can give us spatial information.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so then Helmholtz came along.
He did.
And kind of tweaked this idea.
Yeah, he agreed. We need local signs. But he said they're not just about the feeling of the eye muscles moving.
Okay.
He said it's about the effort.
Effort.
Yeah, the will to move the eyes.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like a motor command.
Okay.
You're sending a signal to move your eyes.
Okay.
And that signal, that's what creates the local sign.
Okay.
And he had this really cool piece of evidence for this.
What was that?
Okay, so imagine you try to move your eyes.
Yeah.
But they're paralyzed.
Oh.
They can't actually move.
Right.
What happens?
I don't know what happens.
The world seems to shift.
Really?
Even though your eyes haven't moved.
Oh, wow. That's trippy.
It is.
Yeah.
And that suggests that motor command, that effort to move your eyes, that's being used as a spatial cue.
So it's like my brain saying, okay,
Yeah.
I sent the signal to move my eyes this way. So the world must have shifted.
Right. In the opposite direction.
On my retina, even though my eyes didn't move.
Exactly.
That's so wild.
It's like your brain is anticipating the movement.
Yeah.
And then using that anticipation to figure out where things are.
Wow, so this is really highlighting.
It is, yeah.
How active our brains are in constructing our spatial awareness.
Totally. It's not just a passive process.
Yeah. We're not just sitting there letting the world impress itself upon us.
Right.
We're actively involved.
Yeah, and that leads us to this whole other set of theories.
Okay.
Called sensory-motor contingency theories.
Okay, the sensory-motor contingency.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
But it's a really important idea.
Okay, so what's the core concept here?
The idea is that perception, how we see the world, it depends on us being able to predict.
Predict.
Yeah, predict what's going to happen to our senses when we move.
Oh, okay.
To perceive something, you kind of have to know what's going to happen to your sensory input.
If I move this way or that way?
Yeah, if you move your head, if you reach out.
Oh, okay.
If you walk around.
So it's like my brain is constantly running simulations.
Like that, yeah.
Of how my actions will change what I see and feel.
Totally.
Okay, so this connects to a really classic philosophical problem.
Yeah, it does.
Visual direction constancy.
That's the one.
Right. Why does the world look stable when our eyes are constantly moving?
Right. You know, our eyes are always darting around, making these little jumps, saccades.
Right, but the world doesn't feel jumpy.
It doesn't, so how does that work?
Right.
And one of the key theories to explain that is called the efference copy theory.
Okay, efference copy. So what's that all about?
So every time your brain sends a command to your eye, muscles to move your eyes, it also sends a copy of that command.
A copy?
Yeah, an efference copy to other parts of the brain.
Okay.
And that copy is used to predict how the image on your retina is going to change.
Right, because if my eye moves, the image on my retina moves.
Exactly.
So it's like my brain is anticipating that shift.
It is, yeah.
And canceling it out.
Exactly, so you don't see the world jumping.
Wow.
A guy named Middlestate.
Uh-huh.
He said this really cool thing about it.
Oh, what did he say?
He said that what we perceive as changes in the external world is the difference between what we expect to see based on our motor command.
So the efference copy telling us how the image should change and then what we actually receive from our eyes.
Exactly. So it's like subtracting the expected change from the actual input.
And what's left is what we perceive.
That's what we see as the world moving.
Wow. Okay, so this efference copy theory.
Yeah.
It's pretty elegant, but is it the whole story?
It's a really good start, but it's not the whole story.
Okay, so what are some of the things it doesn't quite explain?
Well, for one thing, it's not just efference copy.
Okay.
We also have proprioception.
Right, that sense of where our body is in space.
Exactly. So we get feedback from our eye muscles themselves.
Telling us where our eyes are pointing.
Right, and that also contributes to our sense of visual stability.
Okay, so there's more going on.
There is.
Than just the efference copy.
Right, and there's this weird thing called the autokinetic effect.
Autokinetic effect? I've never heard of that.
So if you're in a completely dark room.
Okay.
And you look at a stationary point of light. It starts to look like it's moving.
Really?
Even though it's not.
That's strange.
It is really strange. And that's hard to explain.
Okay.
If efference copy is the only thing determining.
Right, because my eyes aren't moving.
Exactly.
But the light looks like it's moving.
Right, so something else must be going on.
Right, so there's more to visual stability.
There is.
Than just efference copy.
And our perception of visual stability isn't perfect either.
What do you mean?
So if something moves very slightly, you might not notice.
Okay.
But then if it moves a bit more,
yeah,
but still not enough for you to consciously see the movement,
okay,
you get this weird jiggly effect.
So like my brain is trying to hold on to that stable image.
It's trying, yeah.
But it's not quite working.
Right, so that suggests that our perception of the visual world isn't just this one unified thing.
Okay.
It might involve attention.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe we're paying attention to certain objects and not others.
Okay.
And that could affect how stable they seem.
So it's not just this global cancellation.
Right. It's more complex than that.
Of all retinal image shifts. Okay, so if efference copy isn't the whole story, what other ideas have people come up with?
Well, there's the reference object theory.
Reference object, okay.
Yeah. The idea is that before you move your eyes,
okay,
you kind of latch onto the target.
The thing I'm going to look at.
Yeah, and maybe a few landmarks around it.
Okay.
And you remember their location relative to your eyes.
Okay.
Then after your eyes move, you look for those reference objects in the new image.
Mm.
If you find them where you expect them, the world seems stable.
But if they're not there,
then you perceive a shift.
Oh, okay. So it's like using landmarks to reorient yourself after you turn your head.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And then there's spatial remapping.
Spatial remapping.
Yeah, this is the idea that your brain actually updates the locations of objects.
Updates.
Yeah.
Before your eyes even move.
Exactly. So it's like it's predicting where things are going to be and updating its internal map.
Wow.
Based on that prediction.
So this is really proactive.
It is, yeah.
It's not just reacting to the change after it happens.
Right. It's planning ahead.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And there's even evidence from neurons.
Oh, wow.
In the visual system that actually shift their receptive fields.
They're what?
Their receptive fields.
Okay.
So that's the area of space that a neuron responds to.
Okay.
And these neurons, they shift their receptive fields in the direction of the upcoming eye movement.
Before the eye even moves.
Exactly.
Wow. So it's like they're getting ready.
They're getting ready.
For the new information.
Yeah, they're anticipating the change.
Wow. Okay, so we've got all these different mechanisms for explaining visual stability.
Right.
But now let's talk about Richard Held.
Richard Held.
And his reafference theory.
Reafference theory, yeah.
So he took these ideas about action and perception and really broadened the scope.
He did.
It's not just about visual stability anymore.
Right. It's about how we learn
to
interact with the world in general.
Through our actions.
Exactly.
Okay, so what was his big idea?
Well, he said, look, we learn the consequences of our own movements.
Okay.
Right? We move our arm.
Yeah.
We see what happened.
Okay.
We store that information.
Okay.
And we use it to plan future actions.
So it's like building up this library.
It's like that.
Of sensorimotor experiences.
Yeah, he called it correlational storage.
Correlational storage, okay.
Right, we're correlating our movements.
With the sensory feedback we get.
Exactly, and he did these really cool experiments.
Oh, tell me about them.
Okay, so he had people wear prisms.
Prisms?
Yeah, special glasses that distort your vision.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So things look shifted.
Okay.
Or upside down.
Oh, man, that'd be weird.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
And what he found was that people could adapt to these distortions.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they could learn to move accurately.
Even though the world looked all messed up.
Exactly. But here's the key.
What's that?
They adapted much faster.
Okay.
If they were actively moving around.
Oh, interesting.
And seeing the consequences of their actions.
So just seeing the distorted world wasn't enough.
No, you had to move.
You had to interact with it.
Yeah, he called this reafferent visual stimulation.
Okay, so that's the visual feedback that you get from your own movements.
Exactly. And he said this reafference.
Okay.
It's crucial for maintaining perceptual stability in normal conditions.
Right.
And for adapting to new sensory motor situations.
Like wearing those crazy prisms?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like a fundamental principle
of
how our brains learn to interact with the world.
Exactly.
But of course, there are always more questions, right?
Of course.
So people started asking, is this idea of canceling out retinal image displacement, is that as relevant for long-term adaptation, like with the prisms, as it is for those quick eye movements we're always making?
Right, those saccades.
Yeah.
Maybe the mechanisms are different.
Right, maybe there are different things going on.
Yeah.
And plus, how does simply knowing the sensory consequences of a movement actually let us do the movement?
Right, it seems like there's got to be more to it.
Like some kind of skill, some kind of know-how.
Right, and there's evidence that adaptation can happen.
Oh, really?
Even with passive movement.
So I don't even have to be actively moving myself.
Right, like someone could move your arm for you.
Okay.
And you could still adapt.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And sometimes even without any movement at all.
Wow, so the role of action might be more complex.
It seems like it.
Than we initially thought.
Right.
Okay, so what are some of the alternative explanations?
Well, there's the information hypothesis.
Information hypothesis, okay.
Yeah, this says that maybe adaptation, it's more about detecting invariant information.
Invariant?
Yeah, so information that stays the same even when the sensory input changes.
Okay.
So maybe it's about detecting the pattern of the optical distortion itself.
Oh.
Or maybe it's about the conflict.
Conflict?
Yeah, between different senses.
Oh, like vision and proprioception.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So active movement on this view,
okay,
it just helps make that conflict more obvious.
So it's like highlighting the mismatch between what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then there's this really cool idea.
What's that?
That maybe the adaptation we see in these PRISM experiments, maybe it's not about vision changing.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's about proprioception changing.
So my sense of where my body is in space is recalibrated.
Right. So Stratton, the guy who did those early inverting lens experiments.
Oh, right. Where everything's upside down?
Yeah. He said that after he adapted and he took the lenses off, things didn't look upside down.
Really?
It felt like his body was located.
Oh, wow.
Where he was seeing it.
So like my brain's saying, okay, I keep seeing my hand over there. So that must be where it is.
Exactly.
Even though it feels like it's somewhere else.
Right. And so that's the proprioceptive change theory.
Okay, proprioceptive change.
Yeah, the meaning of those signals from your muscles and joints. They get adjusted.
To match the visual input.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're really getting into some more radical ideas.
We are, yeah.
About action and perception.
So the enactive approach.
The enactive approach, okay.
Yeah, it takes some of these ideas, especially reafference theory, and pushes them even further.
Okay, so how do they push it further?
Well, they really emphasize this idea that we have this implicit knowledge.
Okay, implicit, so not conscious knowledge.
Right, it's unconscious of how our sensory input changes.